Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This session is called Gender Equality and WASH, Mutually Reinforcing Domains of Change. Welcome here in Stockholm, and also welcome to our audience online from around the world. My name is Martina Neer. I am a Gender and WASH Policy Specialist with WaterAid, and I will be moderating today's session. So over the past decades, we have witnessed some important progress when it comes to gender equality. Lives of women and girls has been transformed, and we've seen how inclusion and empowerment can really unlock development of entire communities. But since we gathered here last year, the context has shifted. The space for gender equality and inclusion is shrinking, perhaps faster than ever. Around the world, we're seeing policy reversals and diminishing commitments, and a worrying backlash. The progress or something that we once called progress, now stands at risk of being undone. And UN Women data tells us that nearly 1 in 4 countries around the world are seeing regression on women's rights. And 1 in 10 women live in extreme poverty. Ending poverty for women and girls will take us something like 137 years to end. And these might sound like abstract numbers, but they represent millions of lives, millions of futures, and obviously millions of rights. So we also know that gender equality and WASH are mutually reinforcing. When women and girls are empowered, WASH progress accelerates. And when WASH services are gender responsive, women and girls can pursue education, health, livelihoods. And when these two domains move forward together, they create change far beyond their own domains. So this makes our responsibility very clear. The commitments made in the Beijing Declaration and the SDGs, they're not optional. They're promises. So as we begin this session, I invite all of us in the room, all of us online, to really recognize the urgency of this moment, to safeguard the hard-won gains, and to push back against regression, and to keep women and girls at the very center of the WASH agenda. So today, we will hear from some very interesting speakers. We have Agenda for Change, World Vision, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, WaterAid, and Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We will learn, hopefully we will be inspired, and continue to move forward together. So, in order to help us set the scene, I would like to invite actually also the mastermind behind this session, who unfortunately could not be in the room, but she's with us online. We invite Bethlehem Mengistu, who is the Global Coordinator for Agenda for Change, who will share a little bit of a framing around how critical gender equality is for WASH system strengthening and the Sustainable Development Goals. Fire away, Betty.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and kind introduction. I am pleased to be here on behalf of Agenda for Change, alongside our members, WaterAid and World Vision, who are co-convening this important session. So I'll just jump into my slides. If I can have the first slide, please. Thank you. So let's start with the core of our discussion, and it touches on what Martina mentioned in her introduction, the connection between gender equality, SDG 6, and WASH, gender equality, SDG 5, and WASH, SDG 6. They are interdependent goals. Rather than parallel tracks, they are quite interdependent and therefore mutually reinforcing domains of change, as Martina mentioned earlier. And one of the important things, the key opportunity and the SDGs is that they were designed as a holistic framework based on the recognition that a person's dignity, opportunity, and well-being depends on many things coming together. And that's the key point here. You cannot separate water, sanitation, and hygiene from gender equality because to truly thrive, people need both. Clean water and safe sanitation, yes, but also the freedom, the voice, and the agency that comes with equality. Next slide, please. Um, so there is a lot to be concerned about. There is a lot of regression, as Martina had mentioned, and the latest global gender gap report tells us that it will take 134 years to reach parity. And this should stop us in our tracks because it's quite worrying, quite concerning. Because when one global goal falters, others follow suit because of the integrated nature of development impact and progress. But within this concerning narrative, there is hopeful news. WASH is one of the fastest levers we have to change this narrative. Research shows us that safe water, sanitation, and hygiene not only reduce unpaid care burdens, but also improve girls' confidence in school, boosts women's roles in governance, and create pathways to work and leadership. So in short, every drop of opportunity unlocked through WASH accelerates progress across education, health, livelihoods, and empowerment. So
Betty, you're back on the screen.
oh, did you lose me on the previous slide, Martina?
Yes. So just the last couple of sentences.
Okay. Regarding the opportunity and the urgency, the key point that I'd like to convey is given the fact that WASH is a lever for change and the interconnectedness across development goals, is if we ignore WASH as a key investment opportunity, we further reinforce the 134 years of waiting. But if we get it right, we cut that waiting quite dramatically. So just highlighting the opportunities within this very concerning narrative. I'll now proceed to the following slide. So what is the connection between WASH system strengthening and gender equality? So WASH system strengthening is about more than infrastructure. It's about creating services that are reliable, inclusive, and resilient. And gender equality is central to this. When women participate in governance, when data reveals who is left behind, when financing addresses gender-specific barriers, and when women lead locally, the system itself becomes stronger. In turn, stronger systems make it easier to advance gender equality, creating a virtuous cycle where inclusive, effective, and sustainable WASH services are possible for everyone. And it's exactly what SDGs are designed for. It's about interconnected progress, where achieving one goal accelerates the other. Next slide, please. This diagram looks a bit busy and complex, but I expect to the systems nerds in the room it might look like art. But it is a busy diagram. It is complex. And the reason for that is because the WASH system and WASH system strengthening is complex. It's complex work. It's a web of actors, factors, and interactions. It's a way to see, understand, and think about the sector and your place in it. So be it, finance, governance, service delivery, they all intersect across multiple boundaries. But when we simplify this, it can come down to three things. It can come down to who makes the decisions, who delivers the services, and who lives with the outcomes. So when looking at the actors in this systems maze or the systems narrative, we have government, we have service providers, we have the community who work with and are supported or enabled by civil society, donors, and the private sector. And all these actors interact with factors like financing, like data, like policy or social norms. And the key takeaway here is gender equality must be embedded across all the actors and the factors, or the system remains incomplete. And no single actor can do this alone, because strong systems rely on collaboration, partnership, and collective action. So the question is no longer where gender equality belongs, whether it belongs in the WASH system. It's actually about how boldly we embed it, how quickly we scale what works, and how fully we work together to make the system serve everyone. Next slide, please. So this final slide is about moving from principle to practice. So far, I talked about the interdependence across goals, and the goals being our common definition, and the promises that have been made around universality, around basic services, but also rights. So this slide is directed at facilitating the transition from the principles that we have heard about so far to practices, bringing gender equality to life in WASH systems. And what is it that we need to think about in our programming from the integration and the system strengthening lens? There are three things I want to leave it with. The first is think systems. Gender equality isn't just an add-on. Strengthening WASH systems means making policies, programs, and services work for everyone. That's the first thing. The second is think beyond access. It's not only about infrastructure, it's about agency, it's about inclusion, it's about voice, making sure that women and girls can shape the systems that affect their lives. And thirdly, think accountability. How do we know change is real? Strong systems build in ways to track, learn, and improve. So let's keep these three things in mind, and we'll be hearing from our members about their practical experience around their programming and interventions. We'll be hearing from World Vision and WaterAid, who will show how WASH and inclusive strengthened systems can turn principles into lasting gender equality. And I do believe that before we hear from the best practices our members have come with, we have a key contribution. So I will stop there. I'd like to say thank you for listening and hand back over to our moderator, Martina. Martina, over to you.
Thank you, Betty. Perhaps, I don't know if you can hear it, but for the sake of it. Thank you so much, Betty. That kind of framing for us, I think, is really a good reminder as we move into the main part of this session. And to deliver the keynote speech of today, I would like to invite up on stage Jean-Bernard Carrasco, who is the Assistant Secretary for Climate Resilience and Finance at Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. First of all, I'd just like to thank the organisers, and I'd also like to acknowledge the Sami people of Sweden, any Indigenous people joining us online, including Indigenous Australians, and just acknowledge their stewardship of land and water and their knowledge as well. Thanks for the introduction. So I work in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I'm responsible for our climate finance, our water international development engagement, and our food and agriculture as well. So you will forgive me if I talk from the Australian perspective and be a bit parochial, but hopefully this will bring our experience to this very rich discussion. I'll try and be brief because we have some great colleagues who you'll want to hear from as well. Gender equality, disability and social inclusion, which we call GEDC, along with climate change, are key priorities for Australia's development program and feature prominently in our most recent development plan, but it's also key for our international diplomacy, and I'll get to that in a minute. These twin priorities cut across all of our development investments, and in water and wash sector, we recognise investments must be resilient to climate change. So we have individual water programming, but we also mainstream gender and climate and water across all of our work. To be effective, climate resilient WASH must be inclusive, because marginalised communities are often the most vulnerable to climate change, and we're seeing that right around the world, nowhere more stark than in our neighbourhood in the Pacific. And being the most impacted, those communities will have the most insights to offer in terms of effective solutions. So I'll start by just talking a little bit about Australia's commitment to GEDC. Our development program has a long-standing commitment to gender equality, not least because it is critical development for development effectiveness. And as we've already heard, we are seeing some deeply concerning trends, and we are deeply concerned about attempts to reverse global progress on gender equality and transgender rights, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. And these rights, as we've heard again, are reflected in hard-won international agreements, and we're determined not to let those backslide. And that's going to be a real tough effort, but we're up for it. We have an international gender equality strategy, which was launched in February this year, and it reaffirms our steadfast support for gender equality at this time of unprecedented global pushback. Our Foreign Minister, the Honourable Penny Wong, a very impressive Foreign Minister, has noted that gender equality is not a special interest. Gender equality is a matter of national interest. So she's really kind of lifted up to that national interest, not some sort of niche matter for us. Alongside gender equality, Australia also has a strong focus on disability equity as well. And in November 24, we launched our International Disability Equity and Rights Strategy. This is our third such strategy. And it goes beyond disability inclusion by focusing on equity and rights, addressing the structural barriers that impact the dignity of all individuals. And as I said before, recognising the disproportionate impacts of climate change on marginalised groups, both these strategies include climate as a key pillar. Turning to Australia's investments in water and wash and lessons from Water for Women, which is one of our signature programs, and a number of the panellists, I think, have been involved in supporting that program. We invest in water sector via climate resilient wash, water resource management and water infrastructure. And our focus is understandably in our region, so South Asia, Southeast Asia and the Pacific, but we also engage internationally. Our development assistance is predominantly, it's like a triangle of bilateral, then regional, then global investments. We recognise that climate change is largely and immediately experienced through the water cycle, through too much or too little water, and we know that 9 out of 20 disasters triggered by natural hazards during the last decade were water-related. Australia's 2030 development policy sets out dual requirements for development investments of 3 million and above to include gender equity and climate change objectives. So that means by the end of this decade, most Australian development investments across all sectors will include outcomes that target both of those. So that's really driving the programming and our support. And this is in response to our partners. We talk to them about their priorities and they've had strong support for that. Through the Water for Women program, which is a 7-year program that concluded recently, Australia pioneered approaches to water resilient and inclusive wash. And I'm really pleased that some of those results have done what I see as the kind of gold standard in development, and they're continuing on now without our support, and that really is the sorts of things that we try to do. Key to the program's success was sustained investment in gender equality, disability and social inclusion via that twin track approach to GEDC in implementation through both sort of targeted investments, but also the mainstreaming I spoke about. Investing in and supporting JEDSI specialists in partner organisations, building capability and capacity. Collaborative development of a JEDSI strategy and learning agenda across the implementing partners. Real focus on that learning so that we have ongoing impact, and monitoring and evaluation learning framework which captures JEDSI alongside WASH outcomes. So in conclusion, Water for Women has shown us how inclusive WASH can be a vehicle for lasting gender equity outcomes. This requires a shift from just providing WASH services to addressing underlying social norms and power structures that create inequalities. It also requires, as we know, political will within partner countries as well. And in the context of climate change, this requires deep and sustained partnerships, sustained investment in gender equality resourcing and research and innovation that supports adaptive programming. So we're very much looking forward to build on those programs through our ongoing engagements in these countries. As we look towards COP30 in Brazil this year and maybe COP31 next year, the 2026 UN Water Conference, and as we move towards 2030, the endpoint of many of our global goals, but not our work, it will be critical that gender equality remains central to our actions on WASH and climate change. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the presentations today and our panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jean-Bernard. It is indeed comforting to hear that there is still political commitment among our donors, as well as solidarity with women and girls around the world. So there'll be an opportunity to ask Jean-Bernard questions when we come to the panel. So please take a note of those, and I'll get back to you. So we will now move into the next part of this session, where we will hear some inspiring best practices from around the world. We will hear from three brilliant women. Pavin Ngala, who's the Global Director of WASH with World Vision. Fozia Liu, who is the Advocacy Campaigns and Inclusion Manager with WaterAid Ghana. And Jane Wilbur, Assistant Professor of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And first out is Pavin Ngala, so please welcome her to the stage. You can use any microphone.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Big appreciation to those who are in the room and also online. I know some of my colleagues have joined us online, and I'm really glad to be here to share that story, one of the stories about what you're doing with regards to gender equality and WASH. And just for context, Pavin Ngala with World Vision, where we work across 50 countries supporting WASH programs, especially working with governments and local partners. So I really appreciate being able to be on a panel together with different partners who are involved in this agenda. Betty started us off, and was sharing why it is important, why this issue is important, why we can't afford for it to drop off the different conversations. And she referenced three areas as she was finishing, where she was talking about think systems, think beyond access, think accountability. And I have an opportunity to share with you one of the programs that World Vision has been involved in that is called Beyond Access. So this program started in 2023, and it's multi-sectoral, working mostly focused on women, centered in terms of supporting them. The phase one was in these 4 countries, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Guatemala, and Honduras. And we managed at the end of last year to undertake a midline survey that I will be sharing the findings. But part of the thinking as we were designing this program was considering some of the issues that we're experiencing within the sector. One part of it is actually about the fact that resources are scarcer and scarcer. There's complexity in terms of the needs that are there in the communities, but also we are needing to look at how we work. And I think one of the themes I've had quite a bit this week is integration. So we were then looking at how do we work across sectors, integrate across sectors, and adapt an intentional learning approach during this phase. So we selected these 4 countries on the basis of 3 key issues. One was they had strong WASH and livelihoods programming. The other was that there was interest and investment in advancing gender equality and WASH. The other thing was that we wanted to look at different contexts so that we can be able to learn. Next slide, please. So in this program, and you'll see that there were 3 sort of steps to the program, but it also connects multiple layers in terms of the programs that we're implementing. And the idea was to use World Vision project models in a sequel and layered way with the intention of maximizing and accelerating impact, something I'm sure all of you would appreciate right now. How do we accelerate impact? How do we really maximize impact in the places where we work? So we looked at a combination of interventions that were focusing on mindset change, WASH, and also economic empowerment. So the first step shown there is we started with a foundation of dignifying, and an enabling environment, ensuring strong individual mindsets related to gender equality and social inclusion, and of course, also in terms of personal empowerment. The other part of it was to look at ensuring foundational community WASH access. And next to that was we formed or strengthened, depending on where they were, whether they were existing saving groups, with a particular focus on working with women and them being participating in this, being involved in terms of leadership, training, so that they could be able to look at how they can, especially in some of the places where we work, access financial services, because more often than not, that's one of the big challenges. So the next step was then focused on family empowerment, and using a model which we call celebrating families, where both the mother and father, especially in 2-parent households, are trained in positive parenting and equitable partnership. We also looked at local level advocacy, and in World Vision we have an approach we call citizen voice and action, with the intention of helping women and other community members find and use their voices to advocate for positive change in their communities. As part of that, step 2 also, and again, you will notice I'm going in terms of the multiple layers, but also going at the different steps. As part of step 2 also, we turned our focus on institutional WASH during this phase, especially focusing on schools and health facilities, because we not only want to ensure access to water in institutions, but we want to ensure that sanitation, and I've been mentioning in various conversations that sanitation is really crucial, especially in this case for institutions such as schools, girl-friendly facilities, so looking at menstrual health and hygiene facilities for them, and I know the speaker after me will be talking about people with different abilities. So that was something that was important for us. Step 3 was about participants going to, really looking at economic empowerment, and going through a journey around that, proceeding from saving groups to looking at opportunities where they can actually access financial resources through cooperatives and use them for their development. So it goes back to what Betty was talking about in terms of system strengthening. It talks about advancing gender equity in WASH and in the broader community. We look at the models that demonstrate best practice, reduce women's unpaid WASH labor, and tackle mindsets, around limiting women's opportunities. Next slide, please. One of the things I'm sure those of you who are involved with Agenda for Change, or actually just the system strengthening discussion, is this building blocks. And I won't go much into them, but I will just highlight the 4 that this program touches. One is on active, empowered people and communities. The other one is on gender and social inclusion. The other one is coordination and integration, and then service delivery and behavior change. So that was a bit of the setting the ground. My goodness. Now, I just want to then connect to some of the key findings. If you could move to the next slide, and I'll try to rush through them with the minutes that I do have. Yeah. So as part of this program, we had an intentional learning approach that was looking at both formative research, surveys, and process evaluations. And we worked with Emory University, where one of the most important things that we did with them in terms of research was on water journeys. And so we, had the women that we were working with, ask them to wear smartwatches, measure the distance, calories, the different, metrics that are presented there. We are not able to share everything, but I just wanted to highlight the true costs as we see them in terms of water collection on women. One that this slide highlights is, the fact that the longest journey, recorded for a woman was 15.8 kilometers, taking her close to 4 hours to complete her journey. The calories, when you look at it, was 952 calories, and then the weight of water was 50 kilos. So just look at that from the perspective of what one person is doing. If we could move to the next slide. And we did notice that, a lot of this was mostly in Kenya and Zimbabwe, where it was the length or the distance of the journey, but also noting that in the other two countries, it was also just about the multiple journeys that they end up taking. 47% of the daily calories were burned, during water collection. Just think about it in terms of the weight of that. And I know we have a reference of 2,000 calories per person per day, but we know in many of these contexts it's way less, And 30% of waking hours are spent collecting water. Next slide, please. Some of the results around this, some of the other results around this are about the amount of water, 6.5 liters. This is the amount, when again, going back to the duration, the distance, the amount of time, but also just how much, when you compare to the actual needs, you need 20 liters at the minimum, and this is only 6.5 liters, 32% of that, So just again, as perspective. Next slide, please. Some of the other learnings, and we did not focus for this presentation the bits around access to water, but we wanted to look more at some of the empowerment elements and that we are able to reference. So the percentages, you can see the difference from the baseline to the midline. The percentage of women who have access to personal savings at the beginning of the program and by the midline survey, the amount of the current personal savings that women were able to make between the baseline and the midline. Next slide, please. And then the other element of the program was actually about being able to start, business opportunities. So the percentage of women who are able to articulate the income that they do have from small businesses or work. Other areas, next slide, please. Other areas were about self-efficacy, how women are able to articulate, or see their perceptions around the ability to be able to save money and start a business, So quite some differences at the start of the program and also by the midline survey. So the perceptions, also just how you feel, am I able to do this? Next slide, please. The other bit that was really important for us was also about just the perceptions around, the roles that men and women have in society. And so the reflection here is based on key questions we asked around, what do women see as their role in terms of taking care of their family, man in terms of having the final word, woman obeying her husband, women being the ones or men being the ones who bring money home for the family. So just some of the perceptions, again, that we have been working in the program with that have changed significantly from the time we started. So I'll conclude, and again, my apologies. There's quite a lot to share, quite a lot of learning from this program, so it's very hard for me to try and sort of bring it all just in that small time. But just the key learnings that I wanted to highlight from this, intersectoral integration requires intentional effort and investment. It will not happen organically. Access to water and work involved in collecting water influences the time, you've seen it, the time that women have to do any other economic and other activities. Water impacts women's physical. Look at the calories we're talking about. Look at the the things they're able to invest time in. Yeah, impacts women's physical and mental well-being and limiting further opportunities. And women's water access can shape the type of livelihood and economic activities with which women engage in. There are things as we get into the next stage of the program that we are looking at to adapt. One being around male engagement, being very critical. Thank you very much for the fact that even in the room, we do have representation. We appreciate, just the reflection. It is a gender discussion across all genders. And market access, that's the other area that we found a big challenge, and we will need to look at how we intentionally address that. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to the questions. Please feel free to reach out also. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pavin. I think it's quite inspiring to see also how our WASH programs can really be a platform on which we can drive gender equality. So thank you so much for that. Pavin will also join the panel in a little while. Next over, we will welcome a speaker online. Jane Wilbur, Assistant Professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Jane, you are online, but the floor is still yours, so please welcome.
Thank you, Martina. And it's very wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm, as Martina said, Dr. Jane Wilbur. I focus or specialise in WASH and disability research with the gender lens. Next slide, please. I'm presenting this study, which was led by me at LSHTM, a world-leading public health university, and World Vision, a humanitarian relief and development organisation that works to improve the lives of children, families and communities around the world. Next slide, please. The study I'm talking about was conducted in Vanuatu. Vanuatu is a Pacific island nation with more than 80 volcanic islands, and 65 of which are inhabited. It has a really small population, and this is widely dispersed across the different islands. Many of the islands are really hard to reach, particularly in the northern provinces. So transport is expensive and very intermittent. Vanuatu is highly climate vulnerable. It's prone to seismic volcanic activity, cyclones, extreme weather, drought, and sea level rise. But the government is committed to enhancing resilience and capacity. So this is probably one of the well, there are many other places in the Pacific that are very hard to work in, but this is one of them. Vanuatu is very complex. Next slide, please. So this presentation is about the Ve Vanua campaign, a menstrual health intervention for women and girls with intellectual disabilities and their caregivers in Vanuatu's humanitarian responses. It's adapted from the Bicester campaign that I designed and delivered in collaboration with WaterAid in Nepal. And the Ve Vanua campaign is important because women and girls with intellectual disabilities are often left out of menstrual health programming and resource distribution during humanitarian emergency response. So this means that they might not benefit from any adaptation, but it also means that whatever is created could lead to more disabling environments. And importantly, there's a 14-year life expectancy gap between people with and without disabilities. And people with disabilities have less access to menstrual health than those without disabilities. People with intellectual disabilities within that group face worse outcomes, including abuse and sometimes forced sterilisation. So this shows the urgency and why we wanted to focus on this group in this setting. So the Ve Vanua campaign focuses on increasing women and girls with intellectual disabilities. I'm going to call them young people from now on. It focuses on increasing young people's understanding about how to manage menstruation hygienically and with dignity before, during, and after a humanitarian emergency. So in that way, it focuses on meeting women and girls' gendered needs. But it also focuses on gender equality because we intentionally work worked with men and women caregivers, as we wanted to challenge the traditional gender roles and assumptions that men should not engage in menstrual health and that they should not support someone else's menstrual health. Next slide, please. So the campaign is designed for young people, so women and girls with intellectual disabilities who menstruate, and their caregivers in humanitarian emergencies. It centres on two characters. Ve Vanoa, who's a girl with learning to manage menstruation independently, and Voto He Vanoa, who is the mother. She's the woman supporting her. It promotes key menstrual health behaviours like wearing and changing menstrual materials in private, and caregivers are encouraged to support young people to achieve these behaviours. A key component of the campaign are period packs. Now, these are designed to make the key behaviours attractive and easy to achieve, and these period packs are given to the young people, and they include reusable menstrual materials, a storage bag, a small transport bag, and a bin for easy use. There's also a visual story about Ve Vanoa learning to manage menstruation and evacuating with her period pack in a cyclone. So the campaign is delivered through 2 sessions using practical tools, visuals, and role plays, and this included using a large Ve Vanoa doll. And that doll was used to facilitate discussion and communication around menstrual health and help young people understand how to change their menstrual pad. We also worked with local people with and without disabilities. So we trained them to deliver the campaign, and through that we challenged disability stigma. Next slide, please. As I explained, we provided period packs, so these included reusable materials, giving them to participants, but we also gave them a small Ve Vanoa doll, and that's the image on the slide. And this meant that the young person could practice changing her menstrual material on the doll. So the doll has removable underwear, has a reusable menstrual material inside her underwear. And the young person could practice changing that when she wasn't on her period. She could practice washing and drying the reusable material and then putting it back in the underwear. We also supported male and caregivers to understand how to enable young people to be more independent when menstruating. And a key component of that was the visual stories, or a key component of the campaign was the visual stories, which I spoke about earlier. But as part of that, the family, so the mum, the dad, and Ve Vanoa are evacuating during a cyclone, and Ve Vanoa is carrying her period pack with her. It was delivered through group and household visits by facilitators. Next slide, please. So the evaluation found that the Ve Vanoa campaign was successful in meeting its goals. It was acceptable and feasible for the participants, caregivers, and also facilitators during humanitarian crises. So when we delivered this, Vanuatu experienced COVID-19, and also they experienced 2 Category 5 cyclones, and it was still feasible. The campaign we saw improvements across all target behaviours, and many young people caregivers reported that they manage menstruation more independently. One quote from Pania, who's a female caregiver. All the names in this presentation are pseudonyms. But Pania said, the last month was the first time we slept and she went to the toilet, she saw her period, and she took a towel and went to bathe. I saw a big change in her. It was the first time ever. It's helping her now. Next slide, please. Continuing on the evaluation results, the male and female caregivers reported being better able to support the young person's menstrual health. They realised how important it was generally, and then also during emergencies. They said that it helped the family as a whole. They said that they were better prepared for the next emergency as well. And Lono, a male caregiver, said when they were running this training, they were discussing women's sickness or menstruation. And so I learnt things that I'd never learnt before. that I never knew, and it helped me. If sometimes her mother is not there, I can. And he's referring to support his daughter with her menstruation. We also learned that the campaign had unintended wider impacts. So, for example, caregivers were using the doll to teach the young person social skills, such as how to greet other people by shaking hands, also how to wash their own body. So personal hygiene, they were using it in that way. And finally, humanitarian actors want to scale up the campaign. Next slide, please. So the campaign is being delivered by World Vision Vanuatu in different regions of the country now. But it also needs to be adapted for other emergency settings. And from our learning, we have several key recommendations for others who want to do this. These are on the slide, and I've also popped in the relevant WASH system building block in the brackets after. But firstly, the study must be done ethically because it's being delivered with people with intellectual disabilities and their caregivers, so a vulnerable group, so it must be done ethically. Secondly, visual storytelling was really effective in promoting menstrual health because participants could identify with the characters. Future programs should use locally accessible languages and relatable characters. Providing resources and training boosts confidence among young people, and people with disabilities and their caregivers should be prioritised for this sort of training, especially in areas prone to humanitarian emergencies to enhance preparedness. Campaigns should be delivered before, during and after emergencies to instill that behaviour prior to disasters so that that's reinforced during the crisis. And that's important because this campaign is throughout the cycle. It's not just in humanitarian settings, it's also development settings because climate change is increasing extreme disasters. So it's important to have this within every component of menstrual health programming. Both male and female caregivers need equal support to avoid enforcing gender roles. And interventions should promote autonomy of people with disabilities and their caregivers by involving them in developing solutions. And finally, but most importantly, people with disabilities must be included in all interventions during humanitarian emergencies, as well as development settings, especially in menstrual health and WASH, with infrastructure designed to meet their specific needs. Next slide, please. So in summary, I'm going to reflect on how Ve Vanua campaign speaks to the system strengthening in 4 key ways. And this is the slide that was shared by Betty. And the first one is that it supports active and empowered communities. So people with intellectual disabilities and their families have the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to make informed choices about menstrual health. It supports gender and social inclusion because we challenge traditional gender roles that not only mothers support their daughters' menstrual health, but it also involves fathers equally in the campaign. Coordination and integration. So the campaign should be delivered before, during and after any crisis so that actors are ready to distribute the packs and young people and their families are familiar with the context and the behaviours before an emergency. So that way they're more likely to continue those behaviours. They become a norm. And then lastly, service delivery and behaviour change. So it models good practice in gender, disability and menstrual health solutions. So it's really about intersectionality. I've skimmed through quite a lot of information today, so I'm going to put further links in the chat and we might be able to share them after the session. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for sharing. I think this really underlines the importance of understanding the barriers that different people are facing when we do WASH programming, health programming, menstrual health, of course, and both in development and in humanitarian settings, like Jane said. So thank you so much for that. I will now invite the last speaker of today before we move into the panel. So please welcome Fosi Aliu, who is the Advocacy Campaigns and Inclusion Manager with WaterAid in Ghana. Welcome, Fosia.
Thank you very much. That was
Yes.
Good morning to you all. It's a pleasure having you here today to listen to issues around gender, which we are all very passionate about. My previous speakers have created the environment and has explained in terms of how gender or women and girls are affected when it comes to wash access. But you would agree with me that this is further exacerbated when issue of climate change or the impact of climate change is realized or factored into this whole challenge we are already experiencing. So today I'm going to present a case of how WaterAid Ghana has been able to integrate gender in securing water resource management process approach. So why is it important for us to look at securing water resources, and why is it important to integrate gender into this whole approach? So they've already highlighted the amount of time, the cost that it comes in terms of women accessing water. So when we have impact of climate change, what it means is that, or what we are experiencing in communities is that there's threats of water security, water insecurity. That means there's less water available, meaning more women and young girls have to travel long distances, even further, to access water. We have also seen that gender inequalities affect the control of resources. So water is a resource which is scarce, and who controls it, who makes decisions around water resource management? Mostly it's men. But in the approach that we used, what we tried to do was to deliberately integrate gender, ensure that women are equipped to be able to make decisions, to have the capacity to be able to access resources and water resources, and be able to use that process to make decisions in the house and reducing the burden and the risk that comes with access to water. So the approach in itself aims at reducing water-related risks in communities. It looks at identifying what the risks are, measuring the monitoring water resources, both underground and rainwater, and having women being able to do that. What it does is that they are able to plan their lives around whether they are going to use rain harvesters, water harvesters, how they store water, and how they make decisions around that. So the approach also looks at how do we better manage water resources. And to do this, what we try to do in integrating gender, one of the key things we did was looking at doing a gender analysis. That's quite key because you need to understand the role of women, role of men, and understanding the gender and power dynamics around resources management, water resource management, to be able to integrate it into the programs. We also use the human right-based approach, where access to water is a right, and decisions around it should include everybody. Can we move to the next? So we piloted, or we had this project in Ghana and Burkina Faso and other West African countries. So what it focused on was to strengthen the knowledge and understanding of water resources management, and also look at supporting communities in drought-prone areas, such as Burkina Faso and the Upper East regions of Ghana, which experienced longer periods of drought. It also looked at climate-resilient water resource management and also women's economic empowerment as well. So what it also looked at was how communities were supported in terms of monitoring groundwater and rainfall. So we targeted specifically women, having almost 50% of volunteers who were trained to monitor water resources as women. As you can see in the picture, that's a woman being trained on how to monitor rainfall. Okay, next slide, please. So we're looking at a population of around 33 million people in West Africa, and the northern part of Ghana faces droughts, as mentioned earlier, and climate impact threatens the livelihoods as well. So women collect water. So for most households, when it comes to collecting water, when it comes to sanitation, women are mostly responsible. So most of their time, 70% of that burden lies on women. And what it also means is that if a young girl is able to go to school early, will be determined by access to water. Do they have water in the house? Does she have to spend most of her time traveling distances to get water? And one thing we also look at is also when we look at leisure. What time do they have to engage with their peers? Was the time, like she mentioned, like the previous speaker mentioned, the true costs when it comes to the time that is spent in looking for water. Next slide, please. So with the securing water resources approach, what we did was to look at it, mainstreaming gender as a catalyst for water climate resilient wash outcomes. So we looked at we worked in 28 communities, having 28 volunteers trained in water resources management, of whom 11 were women and the rest men, which looked at which was 39% of the total volunteers who were trained. We also provided 50 rain gauges which were installed in 50 communities, and trained women to be able to collect data and record rain water. So what we also did was to use this process to empower the women that were trained to be able to use this data to engage the district assemblies in their locality, to be able to advocate for better wash services, better infrastructure. So providing them that power to be able, and a voice to be able to impact decisions that are made at the district level. So what did we see? What did we achieve? This is Mercy, who is from one of the communities in Ghana. And what she said was that she didn't know she could monitor groundwater. But now she's able to monitor and inform communities when water is low, allowing them to effectively manage their water resources until the next rains come. So what we achieved was also to strengthen their adaptation, their ability to adapt to climate change, being able to understand the patterns, the rainfall patterns. It also influenced the kind of crops that the women planted. And it also elevated them in decision-making, having that knowledge to be able to monitor, to be able to collect data. And they have done this for almost 8 years. And for me, I think one of the key things was seeing that involving them has supported in the sustainability of the project in itself. So in Burkina Faso, we're looking at almost the same approach was used in Goma and Limtoka, aiming to promote gender equality and climate resilience among women as well. Next. So we use participatory training, capacity building workshops, and community engagement. A total of 29 women were part of the technical training of water resource monitoring, and also HRBA trainings as well. We also looked at gender-focused leadership development for the collectors and the volunteers across. So what we also noticed was the improvement in confidence of women, because they are able to gather this data themselves, they are able to analyze it, they are able to participate in decision making, and they are able to engage the district assembly staff to be able to say that we need these wash facilities here because the rains have decreased. And this is the data to support the claim that we are making and the demands as well. So we have, we had gender inclusion institutionalized. So one of the key things was to have water management committees, have almost 50% in Ghana in the areas that we worked, having women as part of the water management teams in the communities. So in terms of challenge, one of the key things had to do with women's participation. The periods for the training, especially for women who had children, you had to always make sure that you organize the trainings at periods where they would be available to participate. And there's also the permission of women have to seek permission from their partners or their husbands to be able to participate in trainings, especially if it is outside of the community. And also the issue around cultural norms, who fetches water, who makes the decision. These are cultural norms that have been embedded for a very long time, and having women being able to make these decisions was also a bit challenging in terms of what we experienced. And there was also safety concerns in terms of data collection, because sometimes when it's raining, they will have to come out, go to specific places to be able to collect the rain water in the measuring gauges. In terms of lessons, I think I've mentioned one, women's participation has actually ensured this sustainability. This is one of the projects that we have seen that has run for a very long time, 9 years, 8 to 9 years, and up till now, the women and the communities are still gathering the data and analyzing it. They are able to plot it and be able to use that information to make decisions at the household level and also participate in district level decisions as well. So in terms of recommendation, we're looking at having more male engagement to reduce the resistance that we are experiencing in the communities where we are doing this, and also gender analysis, which is quite key to before the program starts or the project. You have to look at the current roles and the power dynamics and how that can affect the program, and how you're going to ensure that the project actually contributes to reducing the power inequalities when it comes to decision making and also access to water resources. We're also looking at ensuring that gender equality is integrated across all the key building blocks. As the previous speakers mentioned, we have the financing block, we have the planning block, we have the all other blocks of the system. Which, gender has to be integrated and not a standalone or an afterthought. So if you look at the system's building blocks, what this project has contributed to is active, empowered, and critical citizens, as well as gender and social inclusion. So that's one of the key blocks of the system that this project or program has really improved. But also it also impacts on the others. For example, their ability to engage duty bearers and how decisions are made is also an impact in terms of these building blocks, and as well accountability. So what to remember, the system is more than just a building block. People are at the center of the system. Building blocks interlink and overlap. And there's also the issue around power dynamics and cultural norms throughout.
Thank you, Fozia. I think that was the last slide. Yes?
My thank you slide didn't.
Oh, sorry, your thank you slide didn't come. Please stay on stage. Come. I think that was really inspiring to see how women can really be a catalyst for climate resilience. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'll now invite back up on stage Jean-Bernard and Pavin, and we will also be joined by Jane online. And please stand by these tables, and you can select a microphone each. Now's the opportunity to ask questions, both in the room and also online. We have Alec, who will be helping us catching the questions from the online audience. But to warm up, I will start with a few questions so you can get ready for yours. Parvin, perhaps I can start with you. What do you see as the biggest risk of deprioritizing gender equality in WASH programming?
Thanks for that question. And just a big appreciation, especially as you look at the presentations that have been made today. I think they speak to themselves in terms of the risks that we see if gender equality is not prioritized in WASH programming. I first start with dignity. Truth is, all we are doing in the sector is actually about the dignity of people. And if we're not looking at the issues of gender, if we're not looking at the issues around women, girls, we are risking dignity of this part of the population. So that's one of the things that I just want to highlight, even as we talk about, whether it's about gender-based violence, as they go to travel so far to get water, that is a major part. Menstrual health and hygiene, that's an important part of dignity. There's the other element in terms of health and well-being impact, where when you look at some of the numbers we shared with regards to, calorie deficit, the time that is taken, to access water, that there is a risk that we have reduced health and well-being impact for women and girls, but generally across different genders. There is opportunities, a risk of lost opportunities. Today, we've also had an opportunity to share about the livelihood, opportunities that now people, in this case, the examples we've shared, the women have been able to access, whether it's in terms of savings, whether it's in terms of business opportunities, investment, and please note that that is feeding back into the family, the community, yeah? Education, some of us would not be standing here, if that was not considered in terms of our WASH programs. But I will also look at it from the perspective of the long run. The truth is, if you're not involving, if you're not looking at gender equality in WASH programming, it's also about the systems change. You're making changes that need to have the voice of different genders in that space, more so women who are at the center, especially when talking about access to, but also impact of poor WASH services.
Thank you so much. And Jean-Bernard, perhaps I can turn to you. I think what we heard was a very clear commitment from the Australian side, but perhaps you have some advice for us in the room and online. Like, how can we really make the case for gender equality within WASH or climate when we see that resources are tight and also attention is sometimes elsewhere?
Thanks, yes. I think the case is clear, but we have to stick with the advocacy, with the demonstration through our work. I spoke before about how we not only put gender as a priority through all our development work, but also through our international diplomacy as well. So, it's central to our interests, and it's about accelerating progress for everyone that we've heard, not just for women and girls. So, the greater political and economic participation by women really makes all societies wealthier and peaceful. It's essential to ending poverty. We know that. It's not just the right thing to do. And it's essential for addressing some of the big challenges the world is facing today, including achieving peace. And we've heard here around addressing climate change and building a sustainable, equitable future for all. So, we know it's both standalone goals, but it's also prerequisite for progress across the entire 2030 agenda. So, but why then is it so difficult? The economic gains are clear, and we know that gender inequity costs global economy trillions of dollars a year. But if you also look at other challenges such as climate change, it's very clear the impacts and the cost that's going to have. But are we seeing sufficient action in that front either? No, we're not. So for us, it's about embedding targets, very clear targets into our work. And that's important to send a signal about how important it is, but actually to measure and report to ourselves, but internationally as well, on progress we're making. And continue that international advocacy, because it's not just a priority for us. We can't do it alone. It's a global imperative. So just as a tangible example, we have both a ambassador for gender equality, we have an ambassador for climate change, and through those strategies we've put out and through our actions, we use them and engage internationally and look for coalitions to try and progress this agenda forward.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Please raise your hand, and we have a microphone going around. Yes, please. And if you would like to introduce yourself as well before you ask your question.
Thank you so much. You hear me well?
We hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
So my name is Laura van der Lande. I'm working with WASH United, an NGO. Maybe, I don't know if I can, it's maybe not a question, but I've been listening, and thank you so much for these contributions. And I'm very interested, and myself also working especially on human rights and also in combination with system strengthening. And I think what I just wanted to add maybe to the room and to the discussions is the need to consider the multiple inequalities or forms of discrimination that women and girls face. So it's not only a matter of being a woman or a girl, it's being someone in an informal settlement or, like Jane indicated, having a disability, and all these multiple forms of discrimination need to be considered. And therefore, I think it's also important to, when you use system strengthening approaches, to not only look at gender, but to look at all the human rights principles, because all of these layers and all of these forms of inequalities need to be considered, as well as other human rights principles such as participation, access to information. All of that needs to be included, also in the indicators of when you go and score how the system is functioning, because it's not only about strengthening systems. I think it's also looking at where is the system actually failing, you know? Often, especially when we look at women and girls and their discrimination and inequalities, it's the system behind it that should be changed. So I just wanted to add that. And one last thing, I'm part of the Make Rights Real Consortium, and we organize a session this Thursday at 11. It's at level 2, room 27, and you can find it. It's called Elevating Equality. So I hope to all see you there. Thank you.
Thank you for that invite. And I think the point on intersectionality here is really quite key. Jane, perhaps I can turn to you. Would you like to share a little bit more about what are the actual consequences if we don't have an intersectional lens?
So I'll just start with women and girls include people with disabilities, so they can't be considered separately within climate affected areas. So it just makes sense. And then we start to think about other reasons why. So I mentioned that there's a 14-year life expectancy gap between people with and without disabilities. We also know that households that include people with disabilities statistically have less WASH access. And that's from multiple studies in multiple countries. And a result of that is that children with disabilities under 5 are twice as likely to suffer from severe diarrhea compared to those without disabilities. So that's a real consequence. Then when you start thinking about climate impacts, we did a study, LSHTM and World Vision and ICDDRB in Bangladesh with DFAT funding. And it showed that when latrines are damaged because of an extreme weather event like cyclones or floods, 50% of people with disabilities couldn't use that alternative latrine because of distance and inaccessibility and fear of abuse. And we also know that the impacts of climate change disproportionately impact marginalized groups. This includes people with disabilities. So these groups are more likely to live in poverty, which can increase exposure to climate hazards. It can limit their capacity to prepare, adapt, and respond. Impairments and health conditions increase the risk of adverse outcomes when exposed with different climate hazards. And people with disabilities and other marginalised groups are routinely left out of climate adaptation, mitigation and responses. So this not only means they're missed out, but the response strategies can create more disabling environments. So it's just everything is getting worse. Everything is piling on with all the inequalities that we know have been happening over the years. It's getting even worse with climate change, and it makes it even more important and vital and urgent to make sure that we apply intersectionality. Otherwise, we won't meet global goals. Poverty and inequalities will worsen, and it means that more people who are vulnerable will die. That's the reality. That's what we're working with.
Thank you, Jane. Any other questions in the room? Yes? Alec, any questions online?
A number of questions online. We had a suggestion, which has been seconded by Bethlehem, for a development partners forum for gender equity. And she wanted to say that development partner groups do exist in many countries, but the suggester is right. Her name is Nanak from UNICEF India. Gender equality and equity do not feature highly on political agendas. This is where collective action platforms like Agenda for Change can make a difference by facilitating collaboration across the sector and with governments to share knowledge, evidence, and practice, just like we're doing today. So thank you for that suggestion and also Bethlehem's response. The second question here is for Jean Bernard. It says, thank you for the keynote. How is DFAT embedding gender systematically in WASH programs? And how can you use your influence to ensure gender and equity are prioritized across the wider development partner community?
Good question. So I think I spoke a little bit about the first part about how we are embedding it across our programs. This is something that Australia has been doing for some time. We all know that priorities come and go and change for development programs, unfortunately, due to the changing winds of political changes in countries. But one thing we've had consistently in Australia over a decade at least has been a real focus on mainstreaming of GEDC. And it's something that conservative governments, something that progressive governments have continued. We've had a series. I think it has helped due to a number of things. One being this is something that's happening within our society. We're very lucky in that regard. A long way to go, but it is a focus. Two, it's something that our partners demand. So in the Pacific and there's a strong focus. Lots of work to be done, but something that is very well received. And three, frankly, we've had a series of very strong foreign ministers who are responsible for our international engagement and our international development, and who have driven some of this as well. So to answer the question, it's about a long-standing commitment with clear targets that we hold ourselves accountable. I think we have a target for 80% of investments having GEDC clearly in there, as well as the other targets I talked about in terms of climate change, etc. So then, how can I use my influence? Well, I'm not particularly influential, but I certainly can, in my role, be an advocate, be an ally, and I sometimes feel a little bit like. But I do appreciate previous speakers who said it's good to see men in the room, because it is important. So I can speak off the back of all the work that many colleagues have done and all the great progress that has been made. So I can amplify that in forums such as this, and ensure that in the work that I'm responsible, it's a lens that we always bring to our work as well. And then in rooms which I get access to, so like you, there's 1,000 bilaterals to make sure that we raise these issues. So you would have heard, just as a small example, this morning I spoke about the Sami people. So another thing I'm passionate about and that we are progressing is also recognition of Indigenous knowledge and rights. So that's something I do. So it's a similar small thing, and there are similar things we can all do on JETSI. I noticed there are badges for women in water and also for allies. So got to get me one of them, because those things are small, but they're powerful symbols, and they create an environment where people feel like their issues are appreciated and acknowledged, and we're working together to try and address them. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean-Bernard. And I think that allyship is really key. But we also hear a lot of talk about integrating gender into systems, integrating a lens into all of the work that we're doing, sort of on the side of also having a specific focus on gender and inclusion. But sometimes gender becomes that little bit of an add-on, right? It's sort of added last minute, and you think, oh, we almost forgot about this, we'll add a component of some sort. But so what can we really do to make sure that we have it with us? Fosia, can you perhaps share some advice on that?
So one of the things I would say is always doing a gender analysis for program, projects, and even policies. So before a policy is passed or is developed, you do an analysis of what the gender situation is like to get a sense of what the data is saying, what the rules are, what the relationships are to influence that policy. The second is also to integrate it into is to embed gender in national strategies and frameworks. So, for example, in Ghana, we have the Ghana WASH Development Program, which is a holistic strategy for showing how WASH sector is going to be developed within the next 5 years. So developing such a strong program, a nationwide program, means that you need to be able to embed gender within those strategies so that when we are implementing, it's not an add-on. It is part of the strategy in itself. We have to also look at strengthening leadership around gender, and especially promoting women's leadership when it comes to WASH decisions at all levels, down to the community level, to the group of people who manage the water facility in the community, to the district level where decisions are made around where a water facility is supposed to be situated as well. And also look at shifting norms, because if we don't shift the norms at the community level, the impact that we want to see will not happen. We will still have more girls spending more time fetching water whilst boys get the time to play football and are able to stay longer in school as well. So these are ways we can do that.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Christopher. I have a question for Parvin and Fosia. I hope I pronounced your names correctly, by the way. It's related to the climate crisis, and I was wondering if you could describe the different challenges that arise when there's either too much rain at the same time, so there's flooding, or not enough rain, so there's drought. And if you could talk about that and describe how women and girls, especially, may be affected in those two different scenarios.
Thanks a lot for that question. And, coincidentally, even in the examples that I gave in terms of the countries where we've been implementing the Beyond Access program, there has been a lot in terms of recent extreme weather events, including drought. For example, the project location for Kenya is in an area called Samburu. And we actually talked about, what has the recent drought done for them. So, the numbers we were talking about at that point in terms of just how long it takes them to go fetch water, they increase. They increase the duration of time that, is needed to get water. They're getting less water, but also connecting to an earlier question around the risks, there are higher and higher incidences of gender-based violence, violence generally, because they are going further to places which are more dangerous. So that's one, yeah. The other side of it, when you talk about floods, and I like the two examples, lack of water and extreme water, is actually even just about for whatever water that is being accessed. As an example, it's the quality. Yeah? It's a poor quality. And what happens more often than not, and we share this, in terms of who gets prioritized whenever you're talking about access to safe or making sure that people have the relevant resources. Women end up having to take on that burden of not using the safer water because they're thinking, let's prioritize somewhere else. There are other health impacts on their bodies, as a result of this that get, exacerbated as a result of the different extreme weather events, in this case, floods and drought. So there's a lot compounded that when you talk about climate change.
Okay, so I would want to add to what you have said. So we are looking at situation where there's flooding, and when we look at emergency responses, mostly we do not take into consideration during that period what women are facing during emergency responses. Pads are never one of the things that come up in responding to floods. And floods also leads to, like you said, health burden. People are exposed to contaminated water. And for me, who stays longer in the hospital or who takes the child to the hospital when the child is sick is the mother. It means that more of her time is taken in that aspect when it comes to that. We're also looking at implication of having wells drying up. I shared yesterday in a talk show where a woman told me that since she was growing up, she had never seen the bottom of a well before. So they have hand-dug wells. They had never seen under it because there was always water in there to fetch. But now they see them drying up. They are not able to get the water. So it means that they will have to move distances, like you mentioned, taking the time for economic activities as well. And for me, I'm passionate about young girls. How does that affect them? In flooding situation, in situation where there isn't enough water, was there time for reading storybooks and other things? So these are ways that it manifests in the communities. And also, the last one, infrastructure.
We are coming to an end of the session. I know there is a lot to say on this topic, and I know there are more questions both here and online, but I'll please ask you to grab our speakers afterwards, to raise your questions and have a continuous conversation on this topic. So please join me in thanking our panel for today. You may step down. And I will leave you with just 4 key takeaways of today's session, because we've heard you, Jean-Bernard, Parvin, Jane, and Fosia, and Betty. The pushback is there, but we can still progress. So remember that WASH and gender are mutually reinforcing. When we advance gender equality, WASH outcomes accelerate. Secondly, systems change is essential. So short-term projects is not going to be enough. Only by strengthening both the governance, the financing, and the service delivery, etc., we can really achieve lasting change. And also, remember, inclusion matters. It's not enough to reach the majority. Without inclusion, there's never going to be equality. And lastly, the political will and investment is needed. It can really protect the hard-won gains and drive innovation, but also ensure that financial and political systems really advance gender equality and not abstract. So the urgency is real, and the progress we defend is fragile. So the potential for impact, if we come together with commitment and courage, we can really have an enormous impact. So please bring that with you from today's session, and thank you so much for coming.